So the results are in, and they might surprise you, or not. No, they're not surprising at all. The new generation of consoles is almost upon us, and before we get there, we have one last look at what the PS4 Pro has to offer from an SSD standpoint. If you are looking forward to seeing what the Xbox Series X has to offer, do get subscribed because I will be performing some load time tests with every available drive option that I can get my hands on, and that includes the well overpriced new SSD that they offer with the system. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, on to the test results. First, we'll start off with the console startup as a whole, and this actually was the one portion that actually was a little bit surprising. Not the difference in and of itself between the SSD and the HDD, but more so the speed at which it loads as compared to the Xbox. So the load times were as follows. The original hard drive loaded it in roughly half a minute, and the solid state drive improved that load time by about 40%. That's in line with what has been typical with going from the hard drive to the SSD on the Xbox, so the trend seems to be continuing. However, I would assume this is down to the differences in the way their operating systems operate, but the Xbox was considerably slower. The uptick in performance was about the same proportionally, but the console was just overall slower. The Xbox takes almost 4 times the amount to start up. As far as the improvement of installing the SSD, it is about what you would expect from the overall improvement. One thing I can say is, since the analysis of the previous system, it does seem to be the case that the consoles, both of them, the Xbox and the PlayStation, use SATA 2 as their controller, and that would explain why the SSD is not a much bigger improvement than it is because the hard drive doesn't quite utilize the full bandwidth of SATA 2, and the SSD bottlenecks at it. So basically what you're seeing is an improvement from a hard drive to the maximum efficiency of a SATA 2 interface. Because otherwise, predictably, you should be able to see a much larger increase, and that would also explain why the USB 3 connection is as limited as the internal. And for the array of game tests, I was limited by budget constraints, being that I typically don't buy the same game for multiple systems. Fortunately, however, I did have access to Grand Theft Auto 5, so that one is one carryover, so that one I would be able to make the comparison between it and the Xbox, and I actually plan on doing a more in-depth coverage of the differences between all formats and all platforms. Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. So stay tuned for that. Get subscribed. I'll be doing that probably here pretty soon. So for the PlayStation, we're doing similar to what we did with the Xbox. This is going to be a press-to-play test. Effectively, all time markers are from a button press to a button prompt, meaning that once I press to start a game, the time measured is from the point of that button press to the next point in which I am able to do something with my controller, whether it be select something or press the button to move on to the next screen. No tertiary testing was done, i.e. pop-in or any kind of loading lag, because at this point, I still have not found a reliable way to measure such things because it is kind of nebulous. It's not a very measurable thing. Now, much like I've said to people in comments before, if you have a method, if you have something where it's like, hey, it does it this way, same way every time, let me know, and I would love to test that because I would like to have a little bit more metrics to test for. But that being said, this is the test that we're doing today. Since we're talking about GTA 5, we'll go ahead and start with that one. Nothing really new to say. The hard drive took about 2 minutes and the SSD took about 1.5 minutes, which results in about a 40% increase. So, pretty in line once again with the hard drive to the SSD. And the next game is Apex Legends, which actually infers a trend that you might be seeing in upcoming videos, that this is a free-to-play game, so I can pretty much load it onto any system. But this one, however, I did see the smallest increase, still an increase, but it was minimal of the games that were tested in this run. This one only saw about a 20% increase, and It appears to be just in that last sector of loading. Everything else seemed to be loading about the same. This is a very connection-based game, so that probably has a major influence on the lack of difference. And then on this one, decided to do a disk test to see if having the disk in the system has any influence on the load times. And from a sheer hard drive to solid state difference, it doesn't appear to. It looks like it still has the same incremental improvement that you would see on all the others. And that kind of makes sense because typically anymore what you would see is basically the disk is just a product key. It doesn't do anything else. All the information is dumped onto your hard drive for access, and it doesn't even really access the disk. It just acknowledges it's there and it moves on. So the fact that it doesn't influence the changes in the load speeds makes a lot of sense. And the final one for this run of tests, we did Spiderman. Once again, kind of see a similar result in that the external and the internal SSD pretty similar, and they're both about 40% of an improvement. So we're still looking at basically the same type of improvement that you would find on the Xbox, in that you would not be able to fully utilize the speed capabilities of the SSD, but it is a noticeable improvement. So it's still useful to upgrade. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little analysis video. It's not the most scientific thing in the world, but I think it does a good job at conveying the benefits of using one drive over the other. That being the case, the one thing I can say that this definitely is different from the Xbox is if you're looking into upgrade to an SSD, the ease of which it is to install one into the PlayStation, I would actually say it's worth it. If you're looking to increase your storage size and you have the budget to buy, a 2 terabyte 4 terabyte SSD, it is somewhat worth it. I think it's kind of a wash, but it definitely isn't something I would recommend against either. Whereas with the Xbox, it's just really not worth it. The amount of work that goes into it and the amount of stress that is involved with tearing apart your console, it just doesn't make it worth it. But with the PlayStation, they make it easy enough that it is a reasonable upgrade to do. And so if you're wanting to do an upgrade like that and you don't necessarily want to mess with an external drive and you can afford a larger than a terabyte drive, then yeah, I'd say it's worth it. It's definitely a good little upgrade. Now, given the fact that we got new consoles coming out soon, maybe not necessarily would you want to do that. Another thing that we're going to look into when we do testing down the line is to see if you have a game on an external drive, can you play it on both systems? But that's it for me for now. If you did enjoy this video, give it a like, and if you have any questions, do shoot them down into the comments. Be sure to check the frequently asked questions pinned comment for any possible questions you might have, as they may have already been answered. But if not, feel free to ask down in the comments. I try my best to get to as many questions as I can. Obviously, if it gets too flooded, I can't make them all, but I'll do my best. I thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.